And good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Exit the Maze podcast. I'm Scott Jones with Dr. Donna Marks, and we come out here every Wednesday afternoon, or of course, whenever you're watching it. And we try to answer questions about addiction and talk about how we see things, and more importantly, recovery from addiction. I think there's enough people talking about the bad side, isn't there, Donna?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's like it seems.
Bad news seems to be the best news for people.
Yeah,
Good news.
and it's almost just continuing on that thought. It seems to me there's still a lot of treatment centers and treatment protocols that are stuck in. Let me tell you everything that's wrong about what you did instead of showing them what they could have. And
Right.
and that if you're throwing negative at people, I understand the reasoning. You want them to see how bad it is, but all of that negativity, that can't be helping people come out of themselves, can it?
No, because the disease, the addiction in that part of the mind is festering and feeding on negativity. So, to make someone feel bad is not going to help them. It is important that we are able to do a self-examination, but that can be from a positive perspective and not a negative perspective. We
Yeah,
should be inspired to be better. Have you
yeah.
ever listened to a song and it was about victory and it made you feel so good?
Right.
A treatment approach should be inspirational.
I think that when you come in, you're already loaded with shame and guilt and depression and anxiety over the things. Adding more things to be shameful about, or I know you feel bad about what you did, but let me show you. It was even worse than you think. I don't think that's really the answer.
Right. Exactly.
So you really go to the full positive on the whole other side of the spectrum, where it's like it's got to be about self-love. It's got to be about in liking yourself enough to want to help yourself. I mean, is that an oversimplification?
Well, I wouldn't say full self-positive because what I do when I'm working with people is attack the addiction and not the person. So your addiction is not you. That's something that happened to you. And we need to arm up against that and call it out for what it is, because it's trying to kill you and it's bad and it's done all these terrible things and it will continue to do these terrible things. But that's not you. And then I ask people, who are you? And how would you differentiate yourself from when you're sober and how you behave and the things you do and the things you care about and the things that you accomplish versus when you're engaged in your addiction? And how do you feel about yourself in those two different realms? Because when you're in your addiction, and I do want to attack the addiction, it is doing everything wrong to keep you stuck. And so once a person can say, yeah, that's really not me, then they can have more power. And that's what I want to do. I want to give people back their personal power.
Well, that's a difficult thing to separate those two, because it becomes, speaking from my own experience and from other things I've seen, and there is almost at the end of our drinking or drugging careers, there's not a whole lot of separation between who we see as ourselves and who the addiction has turned us into, and who the addiction and what the addiction brings to the table. It all becomes a big mess, and we don't even have a sense of self anymore. It's all one big pile. That's difficult to start peeling that away, isn't it? Or are there little tricks that we could do to start peeling that away?
Well, when I say to people who are brand new coming in, do you think you're a bad person? Or do you think you're a good person with something bad that you're doing here? They can definitely distinguish between those two questions. And often it will create a breakthrough, an emotional breakthrough, because down deep, they know they're not a bad person. They can't understand why they're doing all these bad things. And when the question separates them from what the addiction is doing to them and causing them to do in their lives, that's 50% of it right there in terms of regaining control.
So we talk a lot about self-love. I'm not sure we've done this yet on any of our shows, but how do you define what self-love is? Because I think there's probably it's a term probably like other terms that have been used out there to describe so many different things. How would you describe what self-love actually is?
Okay.
I know it's a big question, right?
No, it's not. In the simplest form, if you had a child, a small child, would you be giving that child vodka, cigarettes, a little heroin, pizza and ice cream 3 meals a day, not bathing, letting them run rampant and doing whatever they want, crawling the walls, tearing things apart, cussing you out, or would you be teaching that child self-love, which is we need our rest, we need a nap, we need good food in our tummies so that our organs work right and help them to have a sense of self with their body in a positive way. Your body is a very special place. It's sacred, and we want to take good care of it. And, I like to use plants and pets. We wouldn't give Charlie the dog this bottle of wine now, would we? Or we wouldn't throw some crack cocaine in there, or we wouldn't keep Charlie awake all night long and expect him to stay awake the next day. Just kinds of things like this that are so basic, but that's really what self-love is. It's basic self-care. Once we have that down, then we can extend to what does it mean, how is self-love manifested with other people? How do we connect with other people in healthy, loving relationships so that we know how to nurture others and allow them, and I repeat, allow them to nurture us. It is a symbiotic, interdependent relationship in a healthy way, and symbiosis in a limited way, but that interdependency of sharing and receiving love. And that's why 12-step programs are so powerful, because that's exactly what's happening. Someone comes in who needs help, and then or in the early days, within a few days, they were helping someone else. That makes you feel good about yourself. That's self-love. And then the third realm is to expand that into a spiritual feeling self-love through learning how to pray and receive guidance from your own conscience, your own intuition, whatever you want to call it. That's what I'd start people off with, a higher power being. We all have that part of us that says, that's a good idea, that's not a good idea. Listen to it, learn how to trust it. That could be your higher power. That's also the way to self-love, by listening to the inner advice that has your best interests at heart, and learning how to trust yourself. And when you get a good feeling or a bad feeling about something, trust it. Don't ignore it or deny it. And be in tune with music and art and your hobbies and interests and your purpose. These are all levels, from very basic care to interrelationships with others to spiritual. These are all levels. They're all equally important, and they're all part of overcoming addiction. And once you learn how to love yourself, you just kind of don't even think about the addiction anymore, because you don't have time for it, number one. Number two, it just has no interest.
Wow. You described that very well. I like how, because I think a lot of people, I have to mention Karen. Karen is checking us out. She's checking in and listening. So thank you, Karen, for joining us. We appreciate that. That's my friend Karen from Crazy About Costumes in Fort
Back,
Lauderdale.
Karen.
In Fort Lauderdale. She's always been a great supporter, and she's saying great advice that you're giving. She appreciates that.
Thank you, Karen. Nice to have you back on the show.
Absolutely. But I like the way you put it into some terms that we can kind of think about how we've loved outside of ourselves to think about how we should love within ourselves. So thinking about the love that we give a child, or the love that even giving a pet. I hadn't thought about that, but people are so loving towards their pets, and they are so caring and giving and everything else.
And yet when they love to cuddle with their pets, put them on their lap, take them for walks, throw the frisbee, take them to dog parks, but they don't do that for themselves. Someone tries to give them a hug, they freeze You know? So, have you been for a walk lately? No, I'm going to go tomorrow. Did you go yesterday? No, I'm going to go tomorrow. Did you go yet? No, I'm going to. So it's just like we need to treat ourselves at least as good as we treat our animals, and hopefully as good as we treat our children.
Somebody had told me once that a great way in recovery is when you're starting early recovery, not in the first, couple of weeks, but when you start to really get into your habits and stuff, getting a pet is a good way to learn how to be kind and to be gracious and do those things. And I never really thought about it in those. I kind of brushed that off a little bit until I just heard what you said. So it makes a lot of sense. Um, but allowing people to like you or to treat you well or to care for you or to even meet some of your needs, sometimes that's difficult after you feel like you've been alone for so long. That's a stumbling block, isn't it?
Yes, but what I teach people is rather than waiting for that to happen to you, be that for people around you. Extend yourself. Be the love that you want. Don't wait for someone to come to you. Because loners like myself and probably like you, we do that. We wait for people to come to us. And just today, I was in a Pilates exercise class, and I was kind of feeling like, everybody knows everybody but me. And then, I'm aware of my addiction talking to me like that, because it's always talking to me negatively. When it was time to get a piece of equipment, I offered to get one for the lady next to me, and I thought she was a real snob, and she turned out to be so nice. It's so sweet of you, but I can't use that equipment, blah, blah, blah. So we had a nice little conversation, and there was that warm, glowy feeling that I got and she got from me getting out of my conversation that, they all know each other and I don't know it, blah, 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 blah. So be the love that you want and you will have it.
But accepting it again is another story and I don't even know if this is an addiction thing as much as it is you grow up, you stand on your own 2 feet. If you rely on somebody else, it's a weakness, or if you accept help, it's a weakness. I know there are many times, and I don't know if it's the addict in me, the alcoholic in me, or the guy in me who has said, turn down assistance, turn down help, turn down kindnesses almost as a gut reaction and regretted it almost immediately. Like, hey, Scott, would you like another piece of cheesecake? No, I'm fine, because that's the guy answer. I'm fine. I don't know. I don't. And as they're walking away, I'm thinking, what did I do that for? I really want that cheesecake. I mean, are there certain things we almost program ourselves to deny ourselves?
Well,
Because
yes, we do. Some of us, and some of us are givers, and some of us are takers. Some people are very comfortable with them being in the receiving role and very uncomfortable with being in the giving role. Some people are very uncomfortable being, in the opposite roles. So that's depends on a whole set of factors: how you were raised, where your birth order in the family, whether there was a dysfunctional family or not. There's a whole set of factors, but you opened another whole conversation here about men. And yes, men are really, especially, maybe not so much now as they used to be, but for a long, long time, men are supposed to be the cowboy, the John Wayne, and I don't need nothing and I ain't afraid of nothing or nobody. And, and buck it up and, don't be a pussy and cry and stand on your own 2 feet and blah 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 blah. And it's good to be independent and not to have to be disabled by dependency, but there is strength in interdependency. There's a lot more strength when we can receive assistance, especially when we need it, or we can accomplish more. If I sit here and talk on the show by myself, that can go on for a lot longer than the synergy of us doing it together.
Right.
And then the more people that we can get to participate, and it's our show, it's
Right.
our recovery show, all of us in the world show, that's a whole different set of strengths and power to help other people. So when I'm saying, I'm a guy and I don't want help, I'm not really helping anybody, not even myself.
And that denial, can actually it could damage relationships and things like that. I'm going to give you a very simple. This is a stupid example, but it's a very simple example of the Christmas gifts. You got somebody comes over to their house and they bring a whole armful of gifts and they want to give everybody a gift and they want everybody to open them and they're all involved. But then when you hand them a gift, they act as if you've been hurt, or you've hurt them somehow because they're not comfortable receiving. But now that takes away from me being able to give to you. So now I don't feel very close to you. So it's, that super dependent mode of I don't need anybody. I'm independent on my own. It pushes people away, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the Course in Miracles, which I've been teaching for 34 years now, it teaches us that sharing and receiving are the same. And so, if you're not doing both, you're not doing either. Because if you're just sharing for the sake of sharing, you are blocking the transaction coming back to you, but you're also doing it for selfish reasons rather than for the interconnectedness of love, because love needs to go to and from, not just one way.
I could not agree more. Karen is saying you are reaching out to a lot of people. Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Very kind.
To
That was one of those. It's one of those things that I've always had a kind of a pet peeve about is the whole. I'm going to go with the people pleasing thing, and the people pleasing. A lot of people think it's about everybody's walking on me and everybody's taking advantage, and I'm a people pleaser. But I think it's actually the opposite. When I'm in that people pleasing mood, I'm doing things for other people because I need them to see me a certain way and react to me a certain way. So it's a form of manipulation on my part so that I will do everything for you. And then you're going to look at me like I am fantastic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and the other motive with that is that if you're dependent on me, then I feel secure that you need me and you won't leave me.
Right, exactly. Well, all these things are kind of roadblocks to really, well, to a lot. I mean, unless I don't know how can I have a healthy relationship on the outside if I don't have a healthy relationship on the inside, and then vice versa.
Well,
So
some
we're
people
kind
have
of stuck there,
functional
right?
yeah, there's a difference between being functional or provisional, let's say, where, I do this and you do this, but we don't really have the healthy intimacy. But yeah, to have a healthy intimacy, it means, sharing and receiving, working through problems, not denying them. You're not so spiritually evolved that you don't need to talk about it. And that you work through these things and you build trust and you build investment. You invest in each other, and over time, the trust and the security replace any type of past damage, and you use your past to work through it in the here and now with the person you're with, and both people are committed to doing that. And so if you're having a reaction, you own that reaction as something from the past. This is part of self-love. And the other person is the container for hearing that and sharing their past. And, my husband and I do this a lot. You talk about not wanting help. He doesn't want help, not because of the He-Man situation, but because his mother was on him all the time. And, telling him what to wear, telling him what to read, telling him how to cut his hair. It's just micromanagement. And it was very damaging. It was like smothering and damaging. So when I say something like, do you need help? No. And, I used to just like, let me help you with that. And that really got his dander up. So I have the opposite problem now. I didn't have enough support. I was way on my own, way too little. And so when I'm sitting there struggling with someone, he's giving me my space, like what he would want. I'm fuming inside. Didn't get the support. But we talk about this. So, and now we understand that in each other. So he will get up and offer to help me at least. And I'll say, let me know if you need help. So, we've been able to work out a much better system because of that. But those are the kinds of things in relationships that people often aren't even conscious of. And what will happen is that, I'll go in there to help him. I don't care whether he gets mad or not, because I want him to move along here. And then I am being his mother. And he doesn't realize I'm his mother, but he's hating my guts, or vice versa. I'm sitting there, fuming up a storm and 3 days angry because I was overwhelmed with some type of project that I needed his help with, and I couldn't ask for it because I didn't, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, but these are things that build walls in relationships, but they can also build glue. And so when people are consciously aware of these interactions and they address them not with attack, but with love, I'm frustrated. I need some help. Can you help me? And when I see you sitting there, it reminds me of my mother being asleep and unconscious of me trying to get some food out of the cabinet, but I was too little to do that myself. Or when he's, struggling with something and I try to jump in there, it's like he hears, I think he can't do it. And because his mother never instilled that confidence in him of
Wow.
independence. So he's anti-dependent, which is different than independent. And so am I, but for the opposite reasons.
We're getting an amen from Lynn Serrano out in Billings, Montana. She's
Oh,
listening,
good.
and
Hi, Len.
she's Lynn. Lynn is a podcaster and does a lot of work with a lot of good people. Dealing with self growth and self awareness and stuff, and it's good stuff. I love what you're talking about here. But let's take it back because I think we could do a whole show on relationships, and I think that would be a good
A
show
lot
to
of
do.
shows.
I think we can do a lot of shows on that because I mean it's interesting. I have certain needs, and I think that even if I find a way to ask that my needs get met, I also need to understand that they don't have the same needs I have, and that's okay. I think a lot of times people think, well, this is what I want. You have to want the same things I want.
Right.
And instead of saying you can fulfill me this or help me be fulfilled
Right.
this way, and I
Or
can
this
help
is
you.
who I am. This is who I am.
Yes, yeah, and I'm a little bit more of the independent, kind of curse at myself while I work, but I'm really fine with it because it's how I work. And you're more of the let's sit together and do projects together and stuff. How do those two things marry together? So I think that's we could do a whole series on that, on how
Right.
people do that. And I imagine it's even tougher when you have people who are just learning about who they are. When
Exactly.
there's somebody else involved, how much are you dragging from them to try to recreate yourself? Now, and that's where I want to go with this, Donna, is that lost, like we talked about, you learn to separate your disease from who you are and everything. But again, and I've mentioned this before, I just want to mention it again. Most of us, I think most of the world, they don't come from that super place where they've got a lot of fulfillment or a lot of self-knowledge in their childhood. There's a lot of messed up families and it's stress, there's money problems, there could be addiction problems. So you're coming out of a stressed childhood where you really didn't build your own identity yet. You've gone into the drugs and alcohol where you didn't grow at all. Basically, it was survival mode. Now you're coming out of that and you're in your 40s or 50s, and somebody's saying to you, you got to love yourself. And the big question is, who the hell am I? And there's no place to reach to. Every place I reach, it's either trauma or a mess. So where do we go from there? Let's start with that. Obviously we still want to deal with traumas and do all of those things. But where do I go to find my very first sense of self that if I can't connect to it?
Well, you have to ask yourself who you are, and things will come to mind.
But
And they
you
always
learn not to trust those things after a while too. So sometimes
right,
it's like, well, I think I like this, but I don't even know. I don't
right.
even know.
So who I am right now is somebody who's lost and trying to find themselves, and that's where you start. Then the next question is, why are you here? And so that'll anchor people often to some, they'll say, I don't know. But then I'm thinking, well, if you did know, like, what do you think you came here to do? And kind of go a little deeper with that, because we all have that inner sense of knowing, but yes, we are disconnected from it. And
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that this is day one sobriety, but as you get into a few weeks, you can start formulating this sense. Most people, when they hear that they're good people with bad illnesses, they anchor to that. They know that that's true.
Yeah.
Most addicts have good hearts and have talents, and they know that. They know that. So we want to draw on that and fan that instead of, the things of regret and remorse. Those have to be addressed or they'll never be healed. But that's not who they are. They are not their mistakes. In my book, Learn, Grow, Forgive, I talk a lot about that rather than beating up on ourselves for our mistakes, we can keep learning from them. And there was that cute little poem that went around a long time ago about if you go down the street and there's a hole, you fall in the hole, it's not my fault. You go down again and you fall in it again and it's still not my, and then finally you go around the hole. Well, you get to go around the hole and in the hole and all that as many times as it takes. That's my position, that often people will give up because they've tried 20 or 30 times to get out of an addictive relationship or to stop an addiction or change their eating patterns. And I say, don't give up. Keep track of what you're learning and forgive yourself and keep learning because you are getting better every time you do that.
I like that. And I really like what you said about, even if the only sense of self you have is that lost person, why can't you embrace that lost person as you would a lost child? Because we all know, I don't know if anybody's ever had this where you found a child who was separated from their parents in a mall or at a store or in a park or somewhere. And I think we've all experienced something like that. Even a lost dog, that's out there. And we treat them differently almost. I mean, they immediately go to a status of these people need extra care and extra love.
Right.
And we talk to them a certain way and help them a certain way. But we don't do that for ourselves.
That's a
And
really
maybe that's a good starting point. I love that you said that, is if all you've got is that you're a lost person, treat yourself like you would any other lost person with kindness and caring. And and
wrap a warm fuzzy cloak around them and say,
yes,
it's gonna be okay. We'll figure this out. We'll get you home.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. Is that you're not looking for a person that's all together, because it's not going to be a person that's all together, because you've had a gap in working on who you are and being who you are. It's going to take time to build that.
Addiction,
and there's also kind of a cool sense of discovery that we can become some of the things that even we just imagine ourselves to be. We do have a chance to do that, don't we?
Absolutely. And addiction separates us from ourselves. So it doesn't take long once we stop that destructive behavior that blows us apart time and time again. It doesn't take long for us to begin to get that sense of self and that sense of peace and to build on that.
Yes, absolutely. To build on that.
And not focus on mistakes, even if we continue to make them.
Yeah. I mean, through a sense of habit, the bad deeds that I did, became part of my character, because, what you do is kind of who you are in this sense. However, by understanding that if I don't do those things, then I can be somebody different and I can be what I want to be. So I really, really like that. I'm just blown away by the whole lost child thing, because I'd never thought of that. I'm always telling people you got to find that something inside of yourself, and sometimes it's right there staring you in the face.
Right.
It's that hurt person. It's that person who's scared. Because there's a lot of fear involved too. There's a fear. I think this is an innate human thing. People have a fear. We'll travel into a cave with bats. We'll dive underwater with sharks. We'll do this, but ask them to dive into themselves and reflect on who they are. People get scared, don't they?
Oh yeah, that's a place I don't want to visit, and it's unfortunate because it's not that bad. There's nothing in there other than the fear of going in there. So once they get more in touch with their feelings and even the discomfort, so that they can be soothed, then it's not so bad. That's the healing process. Learning to like yourself and love yourself and connect with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I used to think if I met me, I wouldn't be friends with me. I used to think that. I disliked myself and so much that I'm like, I wouldn't even want to be my own friend. Now I kind of like who I am, and I would be a friend of mine. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not an easy journey. You're right. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But as soon as you start to get these little glimpses and these moments of, wow, okay, I'm not so bad. This is kind of cool. You want more and you want more, and it can become almost as addictive to grow and to become a better person. Then it can be more addictive than the drug itself.
Very true. Love is a very powerful draw, and it's the strongest thing that exists. So that's why I say once you learn how to do it, you don't even think about addiction anymore because you're so fulfilled and your life is going so well and you're fulfilling your purpose. So it's just something you used to do, like any other bad relationship.
Now, Donna, before we wrap up, because this went by fast, Karen has another. Let's throw this in here. She goes, "You hopefully try to find that person you connect with to share, but you still have to go on somehow." Yeah, amen, Dr. Donna. You're spot on. So you got a new fan there, Doc. Some people are going to look at some of these things that we talk about, and maybe they're going to read them in your book, Exit the Maze, and your other books. And you can go to drdonnamarks.com and find out more about all the things you've written and the things that you've done. But this is not a solitary thing, because especially if you're coming out of addiction, you do need outside help, because you can't ignore just because you start to feel good. I think sometimes people, and maybe you've seen this, they ignore the old traumas and they ignore the old stuff, and they say, well, that's in the past now. I don't have to look at that. I don't have to deal with it. There still has to be closure and some work done on some of those old traumas and stuff, because they will, if they fester, it could damage what you're doing to help yourself.
Well, if they fester, you'll keep reenacting them. So you can't bury things alive. You can only bury them once they have been resolved. And sometimes we do have to go back and resolve the unresolved and make sense of it and mourn it and grieve it and let it go. And that's a very important part of our healing. However, some people tend to get addicted to that too. It's very dramatic. And, sometimes people go on for years and years and years and years dealing with their, childhood abuse and all. And in my opinion, that is counterproductive and it's not helpful. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying anybody's wrong, but I don't understand the value of it.
I fully agree. If anybody's got some background with 12 steps, which are used throughout many different anonymous programs. And by the way, those people who get addicted to constantly poking at and tearing these things apart, you can go to a meetings called Anonymous. It's for people who go to too many self-help meetings. There is one of those out there. But
I don't believe in bypassing the childhood trauma. I had plenty of it. But I went in and I took the deep dive and did some heavy duty work, and over like a 6-month to 1 year period, then I did additional a lot of therapy after that. But in terms of the trauma, I dealt with that early on in my recovery and put it to rest. Now there's still bubbling up all the time, of course, like the example I gave with my husband and I mean, we're never there, so spirituality is a journey, not a destination. You never get there, but you're always there. So, there can always be a little, like I say, it's like a carbonated water, a little bubble, the big fizz and then the little bubbles come up. But what I'm talking about is people who are still hardly any better years into their therapy or their ACA work than the when they started. And that I don't know what's going on there. That's not something I understand the purpose of.
I think it's I think it's an attraction to the trauma. It's attraction to being in discomfort. Some people don't feel good unless they're feeling discomfort.
Well, then
It doesn't even make sense, but it's the truth.
How to fill that void, because that's still addictive behavior, to heal the void and to fill it with self-love so that they don't need to keep going on. And, I'm afraid that some people will misunderstand me here, because I am in no way suggesting that we don't deal with the trauma. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, you will not get better if you don't deal with it. But what I am saying is, we need to be careful because sometimes people will keep, searching and searching and searching and searching and never finding and not just allowing themselves once they've had the major surgery to recognize now it's just a matter of those, stitches getting removed and the scar healing
Yeah.
and dealing with little things. Not everything is the childhood trauma crisis, and not every breakup is the end of the world,
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. I think when you look back, there are traumas that you have to deal with almost immediately. But not everything that we experienced has to be a trauma either. It could be a lesson. There's a difference between a lesson and a trauma. There's a difference between habits that were formed in traumas or bad things. Changing a habit is about changing what I do today. It's not about going back and figuring out, where the habit, it's just changing what I do today. But there are other traumas that I do have to deal with. I agree with you. And the thing is, there's always going to be something because as you go through life, different things from your past will pop up at certain times and you'll be able to look at those. But if you dealt with the big monsters, the little demons that pop up every once in a while are much easier to deal with. And they actually become more about the lesson and less about the trauma, right?
Exactly. All things are lessons. Yes. So what are we going to do with it? Are we going to learn and grow and forgive, or are we going to stay stuck?
Yeah, Sandy joining us saying much to think about. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, so we've actually blown through some time, but I really I love this idea. I hope somebody got something today. I got something out of today, which I'm going to take with me, which is it seems like a really obvious thing. If you could love a lost puppy, why can't you love yourself when you're lost?
Exactly.
It's a simple lesson.
That's a great metaphor that you came up with. And how would people watch this on YouTube?
People will see this on YouTube. It'll also be on our Facebook pages because once it's on, it's always there.
Okay.
And but they can go on YouTube, which is the ATC Network on YouTube, and the show is there. It's also on Addiction Training Center's Facebook page, and now we put the link on your page and the link on my page, Facebook. And we will try to expand that out a little bit more and try to get some more people involved. But if anybody wants to share this.
Yeah, I want to make sure I have the link to YouTube to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually send you the direct link so you'll have it and you can share it with people.
Fantastic.
But we ask you out there, if you're enjoying this, please share this with people. We appreciate it. Oh, Debbie is another friend of mine who has a great podcast on Wednesday nights called Find It. And it's all about, what are you looking for and how do you find it?
Oh, great.
Great show, Debbie. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate that. But yeah. So we're getting our footing, and we appreciate those who have been joining us, and those of you who are watching the reruns of this show. You can reach out to us. You can go to Scott Jones on Facebook, or go to Addiction Training Center on Facebook, and of course, Dr. Donna Marks is very easy to find on Facebook as well. You can reach out to us, or go to drdonnamarks.com. And she's got her contact information there. If there's a show you would like to join us in or have us address a topic, please let us know. Let us know. And I think we will be delving, and anybody who's interested, we're going to delve a little bit more into relationships next week, because we kind of opened that Pandora's box and we can't just leave that open. We got to, we have to find a way to fix all the relationships in the world in like 2 shows. What do you think?
We can talk about them.
Piece of cake. We got, and I just want to remind you that these are things that we found that works. We're not asking anybody stop seeing your therapist, stop going to meetings, stop doing any of that.
Oh no, those are all important. Continuing self-care, self-love things.
Yes, absolutely. Please continue what you're doing. If you're on medications, continue working with your doctor. This is just something that maybe you can add to the mix that might get you a little further down the road. But we never want people to stop doing what is working for them right now. Don't stop that stuff. But always look for something different. It's just it's always a good idea, right?
Keep healing.
Keep healing. All right. That's it. I want to thank everybody for joining us. For Dr. Donna Marks, I'm Scott Jones. You've been listening to Exit the Maze podcast, and we'll catch you next Wednesday. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.